Yeah, 10.5 sounds good.
I could do that, but no, I'll be much more subtle on that.
Yeah, okay.
Questions throughout? Questions at the end?
How many people? Probably questions at the end.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be speeding to slam this through, so we'll see.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Guess I'll just introduce you and run with it.
Yeah, sure.
You can tell a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon everybody for the last stream session of AusCERT2017. I will do the usual reminder, as apparently it still needs to be done from time to time. Put your mobile phones on silent please, and remember to rate the session using the conference app. I don't think you should be rating yourself, sir. So, for the final session, we have Daniel Schell, who can introduce himself and tell us all about what he's doing and why he's talking about the ASD Top 4 and not the Essential 8. Please welcome Daniel.
Cheers, mate. We on? Yep, okay, cool. So hi, everyone. Let's get started. So my name's Daniel. Can you hear me okay? Yep. I'm the CTO at EMT Distribution. So we're a distributor that focuses on security control, security solutions, generally around the ASD Top 8. I'm also a co-founder of Airlock Digital, which is an Australian application whitelisting company. So based on my experience in both of those roles, I get asked about this a lot. So I decided to put a little talk together where we'd be able to see, run through, not just what the strategies are, why they are, the intent of the strategies, and actually how they get audited as well. I can see there's a few IRAP people I know in the room, so I'll be judged harshly. So we're going to talk about the top 4 strategies. We'll look at some, just at the end really quickly, some solutions that can help, that are proven to help. And we'll introduce some free resources as well. Now, I have no ASD affiliation, so I'm not the gospel on this. And we'll have some questions at the end, and we should have time. I might be burning through it a little quick because there's a bit to get through, but I'm hoping to get through it quick enough to have some questions. So, why is there fail when the ASD Top 4? You can see it in the media a lot that organizations are challenged and have struggling with it. And the real reason is that the top 4 are strategies, and we really need to think of them in that way. And the strategies are people-driven, continuous, and proactive. So, and that's what makes them secure. So, they're proactive controls that use the resources from within your organization. They're not products. You can't believe vendors that try to sell you the top 4 compliance out of the box, unless they're taking over your entire environment and managing it for you. So, and it's not possible to sell top 4 compliance. Yeah. So, we're going to talk about just what's the top 4. I'm sure most people in this room, you're here, so you know. But we've got application whitelisting, patching applications, patching operating systems, and restricting admin privileges. And these are mandatory in federal government through the PSPF. Most state governments, they're becoming mandatory in. I know, I'm from South Australia, I know it's mandatory there. And it becomes part of their top 10 critical controls or some other framework that says you must also do this. And what I've really seen in the last 6 months is that people who are going for tenders for federal government work, they have to match those compliance controls as well. So organizations that deal with government are now finding that they also need to be compliant as well. So, earlier this year, the Hateful 8 or the Essential 8 appeared. And, the top 4 is still part of that. And really what it did was it added classification to the top 4. So it just made clear that application whitelisting and patching applications is about malware prevention, and patching operating systems and restricting admin privileges is about limiting the extent of incidents that you have. The PSPF is still the authority that makes the top 4 mandatory, so that's not the Essential 8 yet. It may be coming soon. So, we'll start with application whitelisting. It's the king of difficult. I've got a picture of Hide the Pain Harold here. He's all over it. He's got this. So why are people failing whitelisting? It really requires a deep technical understanding of software and the environment, how operating systems work, and also what whitelisting entails. So people are really failing this because there's little guidance. The ASD says you must do these controls, but it doesn't tell you, it gives you very little knowledge on how to actually implement it effectively. So it's really important to talk about your peers and security colleagues about their experiences. There's no training for application whitelisting on the market, like independent training. So, you really have to sort of talk to the vendors, and that's where you're getting it from, which is never a super great situation to be in. And then you've got the vendors as well. So, application whitelisting is mandatory. So every vendor in the world has got, will say that they do application whitelisting. You get email solutions saying vendors saying they're doing application whitelisting when they just don't, but they're trying to sort of trick people. And the ASD has actually published information on their website which says these things are not application whitelisting. They had to go to that effort to make it clear to people, find out what the controls are, learn what the strategy is really about, and then worry about the implementation. So whitelisting also has traditionally failed because of business acceptance. Whitelisting doesn't work if you're expecting users to be able to just walk into your environment, install applications, and run with it. It requires changes, and the business will need to change their operating model, which leads to, I guess, a process-driven model around whitelisting. So before new software is applied, you need a process that will allow you to be trusted and then allow it to get run. You can't just drop in a whitelisting control and turn it on. It's not going to work that way. So taking a little step back from whitelisting, and since I've mentioned auditors, what auditors are going to be looking for at the end of the day is intent. Intent is absolutely everything. And the ISN provides context to help you understand the true intent of the controls. The ISM's 10 years old now. It's pretty mature, and it's pretty good at explaining this information for you. And what you really need to ask yourself now is like, what's the control really trying to achieve? What does it mean, and what is the actual requirement of that control? And if you're going to be non-compliant with a control, does it actually nullify the achievement that that control is actually trying to, get to at the end of the day? When it comes to intent, I like to talk about Hillary's emails. It's a good example of determining intent. What was her intent with her own email server? Was it about, trying to circumvent the security controls? Or was it about just making things easier for herself? Understanding the intent makes you understand. And I'll give you an example of the ISM now. So we'll talk about two different controls. One, here's a whitelisting control, which is agencies must use the application whitelisting solution within standard operating environments to restrict the execution of programs and DLLs to an improved set. And there's another control here, which is agencies must implement application whitelisting using at least one of the following methods: cryptographic hashes, certificates, paths, and parent folders. Now, if you only read this control here, you can say, well, I can do whitelisting by doing application path restriction or similar. And you might end up going, oh, well, we'll just exclude C/Windows, the C root folder from whitelisting, but we're still compliant, based on the wording here. But you really have to go back to this one where it says to an improved set. So you need to take all the controls, the should and the must ones, into account to really work out where it's getting at, to work out, what you're going to be audited on. If you read this like a lawyer and try to find loopholes, things aren't going to go well for you. So, what's the intent of application whitelisting? At the end of the day, it's about preventing unknown code from running, and then you prevent malware, so it's a security control. And if you can't comply with a particular control in the ISM, you really need to mitigate the risk of occurring when something similar occurs. So, like, there's a control here which says users and system administrators must not be allowed to disable or bypass the whitelisting. So let's say you can't do that. The technology you're using, like let's say you're using AppLocker for whitelisting, you just can't control this. So how are you going to satisfy an auditor in this case? And the next best thing you can really do is to identify attempts to bypass when the control occurs, and then get alerted. Make sure you get alerted. So how do I get alerted? And what policy actions will I take when it does occur? But to provide the auditor some level of satisfaction, it needs to be a mature process. It needs to be documented, it needs to be cleared, and it needs to be monitored. You can't just say, we alert. They'll ask you how, when, why, and where's the paperwork that backs up. So, so if you can't do a control, do the next best thing. So we'll talk a little bit now about, I guess, what the auditors are going to start to look for. So for application whitelisting, one of the things they'll look for is, can the administrators disable or circumvent the policy? Really just what I talked about. So in the recent Australian National Audit Office review of the ATO revealed they had 1,500 administrator accounts. So can all of those 1,500 administrator accounts bypass the application whitelisting control? That's sort of like their mindset to some degree. There's other parts of the ISM software. It all comes together. So they'll ask for detailed designs of the whitelisting system. They'll ask for, how does it work? How is it managed? And what are the policies for management? And how is the system actually updated? How do you make decisions on what to whitelist? This should all be sort of documented as a strategy. The next thing they'll look for is environment coverage, or what they call it now, saturation. It's the new trendy word. Where they'll say, does this control actually apply to all endpoints in your organization? And in the ANAO in particular really likes to separate this into desktops and servers as different sort of buckets. So that's the way they expect to be able to see it. So again, if you've only deployed to a pilot group or to a certain business unit, they want to make sure it's everywhere, and that's what the percentages are going to show. The next thing is about alerting. How will you know that something's blocked? They want to know about that. And generally, they'll try to run an untrusted file in your system. So they'll go like, let's go to a workstation somewhere, let's plug this in, I'll run this exe or this document, which has got a whole bunch of macro stuff in there, and see what happens and what triggers on your system. They also want historical evidence of user tickets or some sort of log to show when a file and application is blocked. So this proves that you just haven't turned on whitelisting while the auditor's in town. And that you're actually using it. So you want that historic, and that's across all the ISM controls, is proving that you've been doing this, not just you started doing it last week or you're beginning a project to do it now. An application whitelisting system that never blocks anything is not an effective whitelisting solution at the end of the day. And the last thing they'll probably ask is to determine your rule set, so to determine your actual whitelisting maturity. So they'll go through the rule set, look at your rules, to see if there's C/stars excluded. Because there's, if you're implementing whitelisting poorly, it'll be pretty obvious next time you get owned. All right, moving on. And we'll see a bit of a pattern now. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is patching. So I've really combined 2 and 3. They've got they share most of the same controls. So, and I'll separate it a little bit, but visibility is critical for patching. And it must be paired with vulnerability management. You need to know what operating systems are in your environment, and you need to know what high-risk business applications are running as well. And at the end of the day, you also need vulnerability management process that alerts the organization that they need to patch. If you don't know that you need to patch, again, it's a visibility problem to some degree. So why are people failing on patching? It's business resistance. People don't like deploying patches. They don't want to reboot systems. There's a bit of a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset around it. And many organizations don't have the maturity to have test in place. Oops, just push a button there. So without test, they might have had an experience where they deployed a patch, which then needed to be rolled back, and that caused some problems as well. And again, the visibility where if you don't know what applications are out there, you won't be looking to patch them. The amount of organizations that still don't have any visibility of what assets are in their environment, is absolutely huge. You need to know what's out there to actually patch it. So what's the intent of patching? So the intent of patching is for, you've got 2 reasons actually. So for patching applications, it's the prevention of malware and exploitation. So, and then the next thing for patching operating systems is preventing network propagation. So, I want to cry worms and stuff like that are the core focus about patching operating systems. And, auditors really don't like it if you're not patching. Not like whitelisting where it's a bit scary. Patching is not a difficult problem. There's plenty of solutions out there in the market, and the vendors do a lot of the work, if you choose the right ones. The only mitigation that you can really put in place for saying we don't patch is maybe if you run air-gapped networks or something along that, you might be able to get away with that a little bit. And the other thing to mention here is soft patching. Like say, if you've got like a HID system or firewall that prevents this exploit from happening, that's not considered a substitute by auditors for patching. You still need to patch. So, those sorts of things live further down the top 35. Patching is still patching. You can't sort of cheat and say, oh, well, it's not really a problem anyway. So what are the auditors going to be looking for? What happens when they come in and start looking at patching? So they'll come in and ask for, when was the last time you deployed a patch? And show me some evidence that you did this. And they're not going to come in and say, show me the patches that were, deployed in 2012. They'll be asking for the ones in the last month and the month before, maybe, more recent. It's proving that you're doing this rather than you did it or something along those lines. They'll often get a sample of random systems and get you to log in and prove that the patches are deployed. Sometimes the auditors will give you the list of random PCs in advance, which would be very nice of them, but you can't really count on this. So they'll log in, load the Windows Update panel, and start going through the patch list. And also then maybe check the versions of Acrobat Reader and Java and all the usual suspects. So they also want to see patch reports which show patch saturation. So again, they want to see that you're not just patching servers, or you're not just patching workstations, or a subset of the workstations. You're patching everything. What percent this patch affects this many systems and is deployed on this many systems. Like, as a total percentage is what people want to see. And they want to see a mature patching process. The top 4 wants you to patch quickly. If it's a critical vulnerability, you're meant to patch within 48 hours. That's a pretty short time frame. So you need a policy in place to go from the alert to the patch deployment, how are we going to handle this to make sure it actually happens when you need to. And finally, they really want to know that your team gets alerted when something's out of date, and they need to be. It's a requirement. So they want to see evidence of that. So I guess see the emails or see the audit trail that shows these emails were sent. Even better if your vulnerability management system makes tickets when there's new vulnerabilities, because then the tickets prove the workflow from end to end. All right. I think I'm actually flying through this. The next one we got is restricting administrative privileges. So again, visibility is critical to success. These are the strategies, right? So people need to know what's out there in order to do the task well. You need to know what accounts you have, and you need to know how you assign privileges in your environment. So the reasons people fail, again, it's like people don't know what the administrative counts are on their environment, so it's a visibility thing again. And it's also a careless application of privileges. So, administrators are busy guys, and they're trying to do something, and they say, oh, it isn't working, can I have domain admin? And so if someone pops them into the domain admin, then they'll go, oh, thank you, that solved the problem. I was able to install what I needed to install, or make the change that I wanted to make change. Without actually going through the actual granular application of the privileges and determining the minimum level of privileges that are required for this access. They just put it in. A really good example of this that you find in most organizations is that you'll see that they have members in the, like from an Active Directory perspective, in the schema admins group or in the enterprise admins groups. These are like super user administrators. And you really shouldn't have users in these groups at all unless you're doing Active Directory maintenance or changing the structure of your Active Directory. Once you've done that work, those users should no longer be part of that group. The domain admin has rights to put the user in the group during that period of time, and then the privilege should be revoked after that. But generally, when you when your audit happens, you might go, oh, there's 10 enterprise admins, and it was just people who added themselves throughout the last 10 years, and no one's re-reviewed it or had a look. Why? So it's a big visibility thing. What's an admin account? And also, what rights do nested group membership apply to people? So again, Active Directory being the big dog, when there's so many levels of nested groups, sometimes it's not clear to you who actually has access to what. So you need to be able to sort of find a way to audit that to see what rights people actually have on the end machines. So what's the intent of reducing privileges? This one's pretty easy. It's preventing adversaries from gaining administrative privileges. But I've really added a little bit extra here. A little comic from XKCD, which says, if someone steals my laptop while I'm logged in, they can read my email, take my money, and impersonate me to my friends, but at least they can't install drivers without my permission. What they're really saying here is that if people are breaking in or compromising user accounts, what do they actually want? And at the end of the day, it might be data. They want that user's data to be able to impersonate that user. The privilege, if there's a privilege escalation or they jump into some other account, it allows them to read other people's data, throughout the organization, or to own the whole environment. But really, if they're trying to get your secrets, you just have to think about this saying, just a user getting popped is pretty dangerous as well, just for the fact because that's actually where the data lives, or they have access to it. So we go to what do auditors look for when they're looking at the restricting admin privileges, the top number 4. First of all, they want to see reports of which accounts have admin privileges. So this is not just like load Active Directory. They want to see like maybe a printed report or something like that that says these are our admin accounts. And sometimes often justification tied with that as well of why they were added. The next thing they want is reports of privileged logins. So when people do use privilege, it needs to be logged somewhere. There needs to be an audit trail of these guys who are using privilege in these cases. And what they're really big on is looking at your privileged account issuance process. So how's it controlled? How do people actually get privilege? Do admins just chuck other admins into other users into groups randomly? It really needs to be a mature process. So there's maybe an authorization request form that a manager signs off on, or maybe you have some SharePoint workflows where you go through the workflow, the manager says, oh, that's your request, I can read the reason, I can justify this based on our policies and approve it. And then the biggest part probably, or the part that most people miss, is how do you review the authorization? So, do you have a process every 6 months to ask, does this person still require access? And how does that process get called? And who's responsible for that process? So that's often the missing piece, is that people might be happy to give it all out, but then they forget that maybe that person doesn't need it anymore, and you need to audit for that. They want to make sure that the privileged accounts, listen to your password policies for complexity and all that sort of stuff, which is all another part of the ISM. And they want to make sure that your passwords policies make sure that you can't set never lock out admin accounts, because admins don't want to get locked out. They're the highest risk for brute forcing and such, so you need to make sure they get locked out just like everyone else. You can't cheat because you're an admin. Something that they might be interested in is the ratio of normal accounts versus privileged accounts. So if you've got, again, like I said before, the ATO's got 1,500 admin accounts, how many actual user accounts they have? Is it a 2-to-1 ratio? Is it a 20-to-1 ratio? It just helps them get a bit of an idea that you might be getting a bit liberal with your accounts using. And then the other challenge that you have is staff managing their own accounts. So if a staff has an administrative account, they might then escalate their unprivileged account to become an admin account, because it just makes things easier and stuff like that. So you want to really catch that stuff. You need to prove that when staffs manage their own accounts or other accounts that they might have, or create new accounts for themselves to do their sneaky stuff and not get caught, you need to find that sort of stuff. Or even ask, why does the staff member actually be able to create an account in the first place? Just because he's an admin? It's not really a great answer. So a free tool worth mentioning here for privilege discovery is called Bloodhound. It's built on PowerShell, and it lets you enumerate user accounts and then maps your network to find the shortest path to privileged accounts. This tool is insane. You can see there's a little spider map there. So an example would be that if an attacker can compromise a user and then maybe jump to another machine as that user, and then there's a service account that has some privilege on that, they can jump to another machine, and eventually they escalate themselves to domain admin. And this tool maps out the shortest path to do that automatically and runs as PowerShell. So it's also sometimes hard to detect. This tool is also heavily used by attackers for offensive purposes. There was a DEF CON talk last year called 6 Degrees of Domain Admin. That was all about this, so you can learn about this for hours. It's a really cool tool for auditors as well. If there's any auditors in the room, that sort of help you, see what's going on. Okay, so I got through the through the top 4 and all the audit bits and pieces. So I'm just going to talk very quickly about some solution frameworks. So, and I'm really saying frameworks because buying these solutions alone won't help you. You need people and processes in place to drive them. These solutions that I've actually got listed here, I'm actually sort of recommending these because they depend on those processes to be in place to actually operate correctly, and they also have the technical ability or the feature set to actually meet the ISM controls as well. So, they're really good ones. I've seen them used in a lot of federal government departments, and they're the ones that people generally who use them well and have all those processes and people. Again, you buy these, you put them in, and you don't forget about them, it's not going to work. I also believe, just in my experience, in best-of-breed solutions for point solutions. So again, some vendors will say they're capable of doing everything in the top 4. They'll claim that you get just a nice single pane of glass and everything becomes easy. It's really not how it works. What's happening, it's actually a little bit worse because these bigger vendors will acquire other solutions to build a top 4 portfolio, but they won't actually integrate properly with each other. They won't actually be able to offer what they're promising. And when those vendors are buying those solutions, they're not taking into account the processes or the controls. So they end up not being compliant in certain areas throughout the portfolio. So for Airlock, I've got a real conflict of interest here. I'm the co-founder of Airlock. We built the solution out of frustration of spending years trying to implement whitelisting in large federal government networks in Australia. So that's why we made it. We've solved a lot of the traditional problems in whitelisting by introducing workflows and allowing people to manage the solution. And it's built up from the ground up to be ISM compliant. Flexera Corporate Software Inspector. Now that used to be Secunia. Flexera acquired them. This gives you great visibility and reporting, and it also supplies you pre-packaged vendor patches, which really speeds up the patching process because you don't need to verify the patches are correct. It integrates with your existing tools, so WSUS and SCCM. So this helps you prioritize patching, especially when you've got that 48-hour turnaround for critical patches. It just helps you get, it alerts you, you can go through that cycle so much quicker. For number 4, I'd say Thycotic Secret Server. It allows you to manage your secrets. So many federal departments and state departments, I'm in them weekly. They either, most of them have their passwords for admin accounts in an Excel spreadsheet with a password on it. And I'll be sitting there helping them with something, and they'll load it up, and I can see a complete list of their passwords. 2 of the departments I've been in recently used Notepad. So there's not even a password in it in the first place. So that was convenient. They even had big font turned on, so everyone could see. Flexera and Thycotic both have stands here. They're actually sponsors, coincidentally, of AusCERT, so you can chat to them. Airlock doesn't, but I'm around, so if you see me and you want to talk about whitelisting, you'll find me. So I'm going to talk about some free resources as well. So, and again, these are ones that, so the first one is from Airlock, so we wrote this. It's an application whitelist auditor. So if you guys are using AppLocker, which lots of federal governments are still sort of my first whitelist, you'll find that the rule set gets a bit sloppy to manage, or it's hard to actually know what your rule set is once you have lots of rules. If you don't have lots of rules, you're not whitelisting properly. So what the whitelist auditor does is it enumerates all your rules, shows them to you, highlights the rules which are weak, and then what we'll do is actually run a test where we'll execute a DLL and executable to every writable folder on the system and give you a report of where untrusted files could run from. So that might help you put more security controls on certain folders. There's a lot of folders in the Windows directory that normal users can write to. You don't need to be an admin. It's a good place to store your malware. So this tool will highlight that for you. And at the end, it will spit out the ISM control list and actually which controls you're compliant with based on the rule set itself, which is good to have. The next thing is, so if anyone's running Splunk, we've got free application for Splunk base. We actually wrote this. We were paid to write this for a government department, so a big federal department. There's 200 man hours in this. It takes all your Windows event logs and puts them into really informative Splunk dashboards. It will tell you all about your user management. It will tell you about your RDP, what jump servers are your environment. A lot of ISM stuff is covered, which I didn't talk about today, is covered by the Splunk tool. Again, they were very nice to let us keep it and give it to other people, but it was a lot of, this has been a big contract for us, and it's available for free. And we've actually got another contract now, because we presented that tool at the ACSC conference earlier this year, and we've had a bunch of people say, we want those same dashboards in our Greylog, in our Kibana, Elk, Logstash, so we're now got paid work to make the same dashboards on other platforms, which we'll give away free as well at the end. That was so far. We don't normally do custom development like that, so we said, we'll build it for you, but we're giving it away. Another one is Flexera Personal Software Inspector. So I talked about the CSI. This is like their free version. You can run that on any endpoint, and it will just keep all your third-party patches up to date. It doesn't have the central management and all that sort of stuff, but it's a good way of just getting some visibility. Maybe do some spot tests of what apps are actually there. I think they've got 500 apps or something, so you'll find something that's out of date. And it's a good idea of getting a bit of a taste or doing spot checks on how your third-party patch management is working. And when I say third-party patch management, I'm talking about Java, Acrobat, all these other apps. Thycotic have a bunch of tools for discovering weak accounts and weak passwords in your environment, so they're pretty handy as well. And finally, I guess just from the auditing point of view, the ANAO has lots of detailed reports about the audits that they've done in the past. There's a lot of information that sort of leaks out of those. They also, I didn't really have time to talk about today, but they've got a model where you can see what they're looking for and how they judge you and put you on the map. And initially, this talk was going to be, I was going to talk about 1,000 controls. It would have been like watching paint dry. And then it would be going into how they plot you on this map and how you move from here to here. I don't think it's really that practical to talk about that. No one would be here still. And the last one that actually slipped off the page was the ASD. So obviously, the ASD provided a lot of guidance on this. They wrote the ISM. You want to talk to them as well. So that's that. Maybe I'm early. Really early, 15 minutes. All right, I actually got through it. So I guess it's time for questions if anyone has any, or feel free to talk to me. Hi.
Will you be rewriting your top four in essential A for the Splunk app?
Well, Splunk app already covers really a lot of the other things from the top 35 altogether. The Splunk app's huge. I've got probably, because we're a certified Splunk app, so we can see, once you're certified, you can see who downloads it. It's a little bonus feature. So we know we've got 5 federal departments that use it and update it, like actively use it. Like once they stop using it, it disappears. So we know it's being used. It was very well received at the ACC conference when we gave the intro.
We might have 6 soon.
Oh, okay.
7.
Oh, okay. I don't have internet access, otherwise I'd spin it up. It's really cool. All the account management stuff. Like, your Splunk itself is slowly moving to become a SIM. That's what they, the more they realize, they pay for how much data there is. So they realize, that security log stuff as well. It really gets the bigger licenses. But they don't really have that many dashboards about security and similar. And we've really taken that, together. So highly recommended. Independent, it's free. It's got a little whitelisting piece in there, but you can make it so you never even go in it. Or edit the dashboards, take the XML out, and make your own Splunk dashes from the XML. Web voice.
I was very happy to see you mention Bloodhound. What are your recommendations to organisations when you've used Bloodhound to demonstrate their shortest path for privilege escalation within their environment to mitigate against that in future design?
Well, often they've given too much privilege to the users. Or it might be that if they compromise this service account, like why is that service account as main admin when it only needed to be a local system admin? Or maybe it didn't even need to be an admin at all if you go granular enough with the permissions. So, like, I'm not an auditor, I guess, but we've used that a lot and recommended, and I've then seen people use it and panic. I think if you want to learn really about that Bloodhound and that discovery, then that DEFCON talk, I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube, the 6 degrees into main admin. Like, I was there live, and I was like, my jaw was on the floor. It was a really good talk, and
Bloodhound is awesome.
yeah.
Oh, well, if there are no further questions, we might break early, and so if everyone can thank Daniel for his talk, it was great.